So Trump faces the mark of a felon. This is an outcome that was never resolved in the Georgia coup case, where he was famously arraigned with that mugshot, but never brought to trial. This never got to this point in the federal cases. Here, the felon faced a judge who had already ruled out jail time, and that is a common approach in business first-time offenses like this. Today, the criminal sentence was an unconditional discharge. And so this matters. This happened. And so while there are many reasons why people are busy or distracted or exhausted, this happened today. It happened for the first time in American history. It matters in that very real sense. And so now we are going to broadcast just some of the key moments from today for your news viewing and hearing. This comes across in about 3 minutes from today's now historic proceeding.
It's a very sad day. It's a sad day for President Trump and his family and friends, but it's also, in counsel's view, a sad day for this country. We very much intend on pursuing an appeal of this verdict.
It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand. I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. They talk about business records, and the business records were extremely accurately counted. I had nothing to do with them either. That was done by an accountant or a bookkeeper who I think gave very credible testimony and was corroborated by everybody that was asked. I got indicted over calling a legal expense a legal expense. It was called a legal expense. I won the election in a massive landslide, and the people of this country understand what's gone on. This has been a weaponization of government. They call it lawfare. Never happened to any extent like this, but never happened in our country before. And I'd just like to explain that I was treated very, very unfairly.
Far from expressing any kind of remorse for his criminal conduct, the defendant has purposefully bred disdain for our judicial institutions and the rule of law. He has been unrelenting in his unsubstantiated attacks upon this court and its family, individual prosecutors and their families, the witnesses, the grand jury, the trial jury, and the justice system as a whole. As this court has noted, the defendant's conduct, quote, constitutes a direct attack on the rule of law itself. Put simply, this defendant has caused enduring damage to public perception of the criminal justice system and has placed officers of the court in harm's way.
Never before has this court been presented with such a unique and remarkable set of circumstances. To be clear, the protections afforded the office of the president are not a mitigating factor. They do not reduce the seriousness of the crime or justify its commission in any way. One power they do not provide is the power to erase a jury verdict. It is clear from legal precedent, which until July 1st was scarce, that Donald Trump, the ordinary citizen, Donald Trump, the criminal defendant, would not be entitled to such considerable protections. After careful analysis, in obedience to governing mandates, and pursuant to the rule of law, this court has determined that the only lawful sentence that permits entry of a judgment of conviction without encroaching upon the highest office in the land is an unconditional discharge. I impose that sentence to cover all 34 counts. Sir, I wish you Godspeed as you assume your second term in office.
Godspeed as you assume the second term in office. Words that have never been spoken in any courtroom in American history. It is a somber closing to one chapter. It also is a statement of where we are at. And the law was finally applied to Trump in one of his 4 cases. Most first-time offenders in these business cases don't get jail time anyway. And if you've followed this, we have reported that on this program and other hours on MSNBC. That's been known. But many get some other punishment, including a probation, even a home confinement, community service. So while sparing jail is common, the unconditional discharge today was actually unusual, legal experts calling it incredibly rare. And so this outcome, if you're following it, is something of a split decision. On the one hand, New York's DA went first, taking action, creating a precedent for prosecuting a former president, which had literally never been done before. And that took on great pressure, also put him first in the queue. And then he went forward and won the case, convicting Donald Trump. On the other hand, the trial ended up showcasing the ways that Donald Trump could break rules, evade more serious accountability. He infamously attacked the judge's family. You heard the prosecutor refer to that. He repeatedly broke the gag order. Those are things that other defendants would have definitely, and we have the examples, we have the history, faced stricter punishment for. Now, there are other observers who ask, all right, does any of this matter after the electorate returned now President-elect Trump to power? That's an understandable question. And if you look at it politically, it's clearly a matter of disappointment or frustration for many of Trump's foes. But let me tell you something. I always try to level with you, and we've followed a lot of this together, and I was down inside that courtroom. I watched then defendant, now felon Trump in that very case, and watched the witnesses and watched the jury. We've covered this through now its end legally today. And let me tell you something about that concern. Well, does it even matter if he was reelected? In our system, that is and is supposed to be legally irrelevant. The rule of law, when it works, transcends public and political pressures and is certainly not intended to shape them. Indeed, there's a funny thing that's happening here where you hear an overlap from what convict Donald Trump said today in his court proceeding and what some critics and political foes of Donald Trump say. They actually overlap. The critics saying what I just sort of referred to. Does it even matter? He won anyway. And him, felon Trump, saying he won and this was designed to hurt him and he won with votes despite this whole effort. But that's exactly backwards because that's the obsessively political lens. He was caught. Other people who work for him went to jail, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the law took hold, and a jury of his peers weighed the evidence. Not to shape or impact the election, should never be that way, but rather to go forward with the legal process, separate from any election. The defendant, or in this case, convict's popularity, is never supposed to be the point, the purpose, or the object. And remember, while it may be easy to forget now, or it's in sort of the fog of a very, very long set of couple of years involving all of this and sort of the interregnum between these two Trump terms, there was a long road with dogged reporting, a heck of a lot of people standing up, and a lot of litigation to ever get the rule of law to hold and ultimately get to Trump's guilty verdict.
President Trump's personal attorney has acknowledged paying an adult film actress tens of thousands of dollars in the final days of the 2016 presidential campaign.
You have to ask Michael. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
You signed and released a statement that said, "I'm not denying this affair because I was paid in hush money." Was it hush money to stay silent?
Yes.
This is about the cover-up. It is thuggish behavior from people in power.
For the first time in our country's history, a former United States president is facing criminal charges.
A New York judge sentenced Alan Weisselberg to 5 months behind bars for perjury.
Lying under oath in the former president's civil fraud trial.
The entire country waiting for word from the jury in the Trump election interference hush money criminal trial. We've got a verdict. Ari Melber.
We are looking at count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty.
13, 14, guilty.
Count 20, guilty.
Count 27, guilty.
Listen, it's a unanimous jury verdict, unanimous on all counts.
That all happened. Now, Trump straddled this case between his two terms, and that did create a more complex legal path. And many of his aides and enablers paid much more than him, and far sooner. His top company CFO was long ago cuffed, arraigned, convicted, and sent to a pretty rough jail in New York, Rikers Island, for offenses related to this case. Likewise, Trump's lawyer for this and other crimes went to jail, as did other aides in other cases. More of these individuals spending more time behind bars for any set of presidential aides since Richard Nixon. And if you broaden out Today is another long-awaited, long, hard-earned legal marker that reinforces, as you can see from the stamps here, how Trump's enterprises are riddled with documented crimes. You see the felon at the top as of today, but from his first campaign to his business to his 2020 campaign, so many people in so many places and jurisdictions convicted. That's not a witch hunt. Legally, if you use that terminology, it's just a lot of witches. The chart you're looking at is made of evidence, facts, and the unanimous decision of juries around the country. It is not some view from outside critics or political foes. And Trump, the convicted felon, atop those enterprises, even as he returns to the top of the federal government. He is marked in history. He is perhaps personally seared by today's sentence and this conviction. But the past and how he operated in the first term is not the only template. We live in the real world. Things are not always under control and according to plan. And in part because of the reaction that Trump courted and almost demanded with his defiance and so many court proceedings, he actually returns in some ways legally bolstered with more powers from a MAGA-friendly Supreme Court that used one of the cases, the federal one, not the New York one today, to give him new types of powerful insulation that prior presidents didn't have. That's also a reality as he enters a second term with no more campaigns to run.